My father replaced me with his stepdaughter, and I became a guest in my own childhood home. I walked into my old room one day and found it erased, everything gone taken over by someone who wasn't me. I always thought I had a decent relationship with my father growing up. My parents were never married, but they stayed together until I was about 10. I remember family dinners, trips to the park, quiet Sunday mornings watching cartoons while my dad made breakfast. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt safe, familiar. Till one day everything changed. My parents broke up. I never got the full story, just hushed arguments behind closed doors and one morning where my dad's things were gone. He didn't waste any time moving on. It felt like a matter of weeks before he started seeing someone new. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was just a kid still trying to understand why our family didn't look the same anymore. She was foreign, elegant, always dressed like she had somewhere important to be. And she had 2 daughters, both older than me. When I first met them, I tried to be polite, friendly, but there was something cold about the whole interaction. Forced smiles, awkward small talk. It was clear from the start that I was an outsider in whatever new life they were building. My dad married her when I turned 18. I was technically an adult, legally independent, but emotionally still tethered to the idea of being someone's son. His son. Our relationship had already grown distant over the years, but that wedding drew a final line in the sand. I went off to college shortly after. Half the time I stayed with my mom. The other half I was away buried in coursework, part-time jobs, and the first tastes of adult life. My dad's house faded into the background. Phone calls became texts. Texts became silence. When I did visit, something always felt off. My room wasn't really my room anymore. My things were slowly moved, boxed up, pushed aside to make space for the stepsisters. At first, it was just small stuff. A shelf cleared off here, a drawer emptied there. But eventually the entire room was dismantled. My bed, my posters, even my childhood books vanished without a word. They were packed up and shoved in the basement. My room was given to one of her daughters. No one told me. I found out during a surprise visit over winter break. I unlocked the door, walked in, and stood frozen in the hallway. The walls were painted a different color. My old bed was gone. In its place, a queen-size bed, a makeup vanity, soft pink curtains, perfume in the air. It wasn't mine anymore. It never had been, not really. And my father, he just shrugged. "You weren't really using it," he said. That was the first time I realized something heavy. I wasn't a part of this new family. I was a leftover, a memory, a guest in my own childhood home. Every visit after that felt shorter, colder. They had their own rhythm, their inside jokes, their little traditions, and I stood on the outside looking in. After college, my fiancé and I moved 12 hours away for work. It was a fresh start. I tried to let go of the bitterness, to believe that distance would numb the pain, and for a while it did. My dad and I would text once every few weeks, maybe a call on my birthday. It wasn't great, but it was something. Then everything changed again. My mother was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. It came out of nowhere. One week she was tired, the next she was in the hospital. I dropped everything, packed our life into a car, and drove 12 hours back home to be with her. Those next 3 months were the hardest of my life. Watching someone you love slowly disappear, it changes you. I was her caretaker. I was there every night, every doctor's appointment, every moment of pain and fear. I held her hand when she couldn't speak anymore. I watched her fade away. And my father distant, detached, barely present. He didn't offer to help. He didn't call to ask how she was. He never once asked if I needed anything. I stood alone in that darkness while he lived his life with his new family, going on trips, attending dinner parties, laughing at things that I wasn't a part of. When she died, a part of me died too. My mother had been my anchor, my constant. Losing her felt like losing the only person who ever truly saw me. After the funeral, I sat in my car for hours, unable to start the engine. I didn't want to go back to a place that didn't feel like home. But I had nowhere else to go. I reached out to my dad, not for money or support, just to talk, just to feel like I had someone left in this world. But the conversations were always shallow short. He was busy, or tired. I stopped trying. That was the beginning of the end. Not with a bang, but with silence. And still some small, foolish part of me held on to hope. That maybe somehow my dad would come around. That maybe he'd remember what it felt like to be a father. But that hope was slowly dying, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep pretending. After losing my mother, I tried to rebuild some version of a life. Grief came in waves, sometimes crashing without warning, other times just a dull ache in the background. But what hurt the most wasn't just her absence, it was the silence from the only parent I had left, my father. He knew she was gone. He attended the funeral, standing stiff in the back with my stepmother at his side, as if he were a guest at a coworker's memorial. He hugged me afterward, gave a short, "I'm sorry," and then left without asking if I needed help packing up her house or if I was okay or what I was going to do next. 3 days later, I got a text, "Hope you're hanging in there. Call if you need anything." I never made that call. A few weeks later, my fiance and I moved into a small apartment not far from where I'd grown up. I didn't want to go back to that state, that town, but I also didn't want to leave my mother's memory behind so soon. At least here I could still drive past her old bookstore or sit by the lake where she used to take me. It gave me comfort. My father, on the other hand, rarely reached out. He never asked how the move went or if I needed help unloading furniture. I figured maybe he didn't know how to deal with emotions. Maybe he thought giving space was kindness. But it didn't feel like space. It felt like abandonment. Again. I remember the first time I tried to reconnect. We invited him and my stepmother over for dinner. It felt important to try, even if it meant swallowing my resentment. My fiancé cooked a full meal, lit candles, cleaned our tiny place top to bottom. He came late, of course, and brought a bottle of wine that neither of us liked. My stepmother commented on our furniture. "It's very cozy. You'll upgrade once the wedding is over, I'm sure." The dinner was strained. Small talk, forced laughter, and then the topic of the wedding came up. "So when are we getting our invites?" she asked, swirling her wine. "We're still finalizing the list," my fiancé said, trying to stay cheerful, "but you'll definitely be getting one." My stepmother leaned back, eyebrows raised. "Well, I hope we're not just an afterthought. You know it's embarrassing when family isn't treated like family." I swallowed the lump in my throat. Family. That word felt like a joke. After they left, my fiancé was quiet. I asked if she was okay, and she just shook her head. "She made a comment when you went to the kitchen about your mom, said she wouldn't have approved of me." I felt something boil inside me. I had spent years trying to be civil, years trying not to cause drama, not to rock the boat, as my dad liked to say. But that comment about the woman who had raised me who had just died, it was too far. The next time I went to visit my dad's house, I barely recognized it. Everything had changed. There were new paintings on the walls, plush rugs, fancy china in glass cabinets. The whole place felt like a museum. Not one trace of my childhood remained. I walked past what used to be my room and saw the door open. Inside was a full makeover. A queen-sized bed, pale pink decor, a mirror with LED lights around it, clothes strewn across the floor. My stepsister's room now. Not a single photo of me on the shelves. I didn't say anything. What would be the point? Later that night, my dad mentioned they were planning a trip. "We're heading to Tuscany in June. Her daughters have always wanted to see Italy." I blinked. "That's the same week as my wedding." He looked confused for a moment, then brushed it off. "Oh, right. We'll work something out." I knew then that he hadn't even marked the date down. After everything, losing my mother, moving back, trying to rebuild a connection, he was still choosing them. Always them. I wasn't jealous of the money, the dinners, the vacations. I didn't care that he bought one of her daughters a car or paid for her to finish med school. But I couldn't ignore the contrast. When my truck broke down last winter, I called him not for help, but just to ask if he knew anyone selling a cheap used vehicle. He didn't even reply for 4 days. When he did, he said, "Sorry, been busy. No leads. Hope you get it sorted." That was it. He never asked how I managed to get to work, how I got groceries. He never even followed up. I had to take 2 buses and a train for 3 weeks until I scraped together enough money to buy something ancient off Craigslist. But sure, Tuscany. What hurt wasn't the neglect. It was the message behind it. You don't matter like they do. You're not part of this family anymore. That feeling of being erased, it lingered with me. It haunted every conversation, every visit, every moment I tried to reach for him and got air. Still, I tried to keep the peace. For the sake of the wedding, for the sake of whatever thread still connected us. But that thread was starting to fray. Planning a wedding is supposed to be one of the most joyful times in your life. But for me, it was a slow realization that joy comes with conditions, especially when it involves people who treat your presence like an obligation. As the date crept closer, I wrestled with a choice I never thought I'd have to make. Should I even invite my father? On paper, of course I should. He was my only living parent. To the outside world, it would seem unthinkable to exclude him from such a milestone, but deep down I already knew he wasn't truly there. He hadn't been for a long time. We sent out invitations anyway, out of formality more than anything else. My fiancé tried to stay hopeful. Maybe he'll show up and surprise you. Maybe he's just awkward with emotions. I appreciated her optimism, but I'd lived in that house of hope before. I knew its foundation was rotten. 2 weeks before the wedding, my dad finally called. "Hey, I wanted to talk about the wedding." I braced myself. "We've been looking at flights," he continued, "but her youngest daughter has finals that week. We might not be able to make it." That sentence hit like a hammer. We might not be able to make it. He didn't say I'll be there no matter what. He didn't say, "This is my son's wedding, I wouldn't miss it for the world." No. What he said was that his stepdaughter's final exams took precedence over being there for me on the most important day of my life. I didn't even argue. I just sat in silence, phone to my ear, hearing the hum of his breath on the other end. Eventually, I said, "Okay, do what you need to do." He replied, "Thanks for understanding." But I didn't understand. Not really. And I don't think I ever will. The day of the wedding came. The sun was bright, the weather perfect. Friends and family flew in from across the country. My fiancé's parents wept during the ceremony, proud and glowing. Her father gave a moving toast full of love and memories. And my father, he wasn't there. He didn't call that morning. He didn't send a message, not even a card. That night, as we danced, as laughter echoed through the venue, I looked out at the empty seat we had reserved for him. I kept imagining him walking in at the last second the way they do in movies. But real life doesn't always come with grand gestures or second chances. Real life is quiet. It's empty chairs, missed phone calls, unsent cards. The next day I got a text. "Sorry we couldn't make it. Things got hectic. Hope everything went well." That was it. No photo request. No follow-up. Nothing. I stared at my phone for a long time, wondering how someone could be so emotionally distant, so numb to the meaning of a moment like that. My wife saw the message and just shook her head. "You know, you don't have to keep chasing him, right?" she said softly. "You've been trying for years. Maybe it's time to stop." I didn't answer, but her words stayed with me. In the days that followed, I tried to move on. We went on our honeymoon, enjoyed new cities and new food, tried to put the past behind us. But there were moments when I'd catch myself staring out the window, wondering what it was about me that made it so easy for him to let go. Was I not enough? Was I too much of a reminder of a past he wanted to forget? I kept going back to a memory, one from when I was maybe 8 years old. My dad and I were building a kite together in the backyard. The sun was setting. I had glue all over my hands. He smiled at me, that rare smile he saved for quiet moments, and said, "You're my boy. You always will be." Funny how a sentence like that can echo through time, how it can become a lie. Because now I wasn't sure if I was anyone's boy. The father who once helped me tie my shoes, who taught me how to ride a bike, who held my hand when I got my first stitches, that man was gone. Replaced by someone who saw me as an obligation, a footnote. After the wedding, I stopped trying. No more texts, no more calls, no more hoping he'd show up out of nowhere to fix what was broken. He didn't reach out either. It was like we had made a silent agreement. We'd walk separate paths, pretending the other didn't exist. And in a strange way, that silence was a kind of relief. No more disappointment, no more pretending. But sometimes late at night when the world is still, I still think about that kite, about the glue and the laughter and the man who once said I'd always be his boy. And I wonder if he remembers too. Months passed after the wedding. Seasons shifted. We settled into married life, into routines that felt both new and comforting. My wife was patient more than I deserved sometimes, especially on the days I felt quietly gutted for reasons I couldn't explain. Because grief doesn't always come from death. Sometimes it comes from absence, from the slow, irreversible unraveling of a bond you once held sacred. Every so often, I'd still check my phone, half hoping to see a missed call or a late-night text from my dad. Something, but it was always blank. And maybe that's what hurt most. Not just the silence, but how comfortable he seemed in it. He didn't ask about the wedding, didn't ask about my wife. Never once asked for photos or sent a gift, or even a belated congratulations. In the months that followed, he didn't ask if we were happy, if we were doing okay, if we needed anything. It was like he'd turned a page and left me behind in a chapter he didn't want to reread. I remember one evening I had a dream about him. In it, we were fishing. Something simple, quiet, the kind of dream that felt more like a memory. He handed me a sandwich and said, "We're good, right?" And in the dream, I nodded, smiled. When I woke up, I stared at the ceiling for hours, because I knew we weren't good, and we probably never would be. That weekend, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. It was my father's neighbor. His voice was tight, cautious. "Hey, I'm sorry to call you out of the blue, but I thought you should know. Your dad had a minor heart attack last week." I froze. "He's okay now," the man continued. "Home from the hospital, but it was serious. Thought maybe you'd want to know." I thanked him and hung up. My hands were trembling. A storm of thoughts raged through my head. Why hadn't he told me himself? Did he even want me to know? What if I hadn't picked up that call? Was I really so far removed from his life that I wasn't worth informing? I didn't call him right away. I didn't know what to say. Part of me was terrified not of losing him, but of facing the confirmation that I had already lost him in every way that mattered. A few days later, I finally called. He answered after a few rings. His voice was faint, raspy. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I replied. I heard about the heart attack." He gave a dry chuckle. "News travels fast. You okay?" "Yeah, fine now. Just some meds. Doc says I gotta slow down a little." There was a pause, long and thick. "You weren't going to tell me?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. "Didn't think it was a big deal." "It was, though." "It is." Another pause. "I figured you were busy," he said. "Got your own life now. Wife, career. You've got enough going on." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It wasn't that he'd hidden it from me. It was that he genuinely believed I wouldn't or shouldn't care. "You're still my father," I said. "That hasn't changed." But the words felt hollow even as I said them, because something had changed, long ago. And maybe now we were both too tired to fix it. He didn't respond, just cleared his throat and mumbled something about needing to lie down. After we hung up, I sat there in the kitchen for a long time. My wife came over, sat across from me, and didn't say anything. She didn't have to, because I think we both knew there's a certain kind of heartbreak that doesn't show up all at once. It leaks slowly into your life, drip by drip, until one day you're sitting in the wreckage of something you used to love, and you don't even remember when it fell apart. And the worst part, you're still hoping, even as the wreckage burns, that maybe, just maybe, someone will reach into the fire and pull you out. But sometimes they don't. A year passed. A full year since that call, since my father's heart attack, since our last real conversation. After that, our contact dwindled again. Sparse texts, a couple of photos exchanged, but never anything meaningful. Never anything real. We were strangers, playing at familiarity, two people who used to share blood, but now shared only awkward silences and occasional obligatory check-ins. It became harder to talk about it with anyone. My wife tried, God bless her. She'd ask gently, "Have you thought about visiting him? Or, do you think he misses you?" But I always shrugged, always dodged. Because I didn't know. Or maybe I did, and I just didn't want to say it out loud. I remember sitting at a coffee shop one rainy afternoon watching an older man and his grown son laugh over matching cups of tea. They looked like best friends. Comfortable, easy. And I stared for so long that my coffee went cold. I kept wondering how people get that, what they do differently. And then I thought about everything we didn't say. Every moment we let drift by. Every small cut that turned into a gaping wound. Maybe we both gave up. Maybe we both lost each other. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself scrolling through an old digital album I hadn't touched in years. There he was, my dad, smiling in photos from my childhood. At the park. At the beach. Holding me on his shoulders. Laughing with me like the world was still whole. There was one photo me at about 5 years old, my arms wrapped around his neck. My face lit up toothy and wild. His eyes crinkled in that way they used to when he was happy. I stared at it for a long time, and I cried. Because that version of him, the one who carried me on his shoulders, who watched cartoons with me on Sunday mornings, who told me scary stories at night, he was gone. Maybe he'd been gone for a long time. Maybe I just hadn't been willing to admit it. And so I wrote him a letter. Not to send, just to write. I poured everything into it, the pain, the confusion, the betrayal, the longing. I told him about the hurt of being replaced, the loneliness of watching him build a new life without me. I told him how I wished things had gone differently, how I wanted him to show up, how I still loved him despite everything, and how I didn't know if I could keep hoping for something that wasn't coming back. By the end of it, I was shaking. I folded the letter, tucked it into a drawer, and left it there. Maybe one day I'll give it to him. Maybe not. A few weeks later, I got a text. It was short. Just hope you're well. Let me know if you want to talk sometime. I stared at it for what felt like hours. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood I didn't need a grand apology. I didn't need him to rewrite the past. I had spent years waiting for a version of my father that no longer existed, and maybe never did, at least not in the way I remembered. Grief is strange like that. It's not always about death. Sometimes it's about who someone becomes, or who they stop being. And sometimes the hardest part isn't saying goodbye. It's accepting that the goodbye already happened quietly without ceremony somewhere between one unanswered message and the next.